I gave a talk last year. Well, I gave it a couple of times. I gave it here, and then I gave another similar one at London Perl workshop about kind of an intro to Perl. Which way around is it? An introduction to Perl6. What's the best place to stand? Should I stand here?
No, excellent.
Cool. So yeah, an introduction to Perl6. And one of the bits of feedback I got from that was that this is great, but all I keep seeing is an introduction to Perl6. I never see any sort of real in-depth stuff. So this is the exact opposite. This is going to be 20 minutes on Perl signatures. Now here's the thing. I wrote the first part of these slides and realised that 20 minutes is not enough time to do justice to signatures and type system and multi-methods. So we've got signatures and then we've got two bonus slides, which I'll hopefully have time to get to. So here we go. Perl6 signatures. So,
is there a switch on the side? I might turn it off.
Switch on the side. Hey! So, this should be familiar to anybody who's done any Perl coding. You can have a Perl6 subroutine and just don't put any brackets in the name, and then you have no signature, and then you have the @_ what's it called? Array is populated with whatever you pass in, and they'll only take positional signatures. So if you don't have to use signatures if you don't want to, so you should be able to, it also means you can have a bit of Perl5 code, pop it into Perl6, and it's more likely to just work. Probably won't, quite frankly, because there's a lot of changes, but it might do for simple things. Now, important thing to note here, you've got there arrow 1, so the fat arrow in Perl6 actually makes what's called a pair, and if you try passing that into this function, it will error, because what it's actually thinking you're trying to do is pass in a named argument, and we'll get to those in a second. It's thinking you're passing in a named argument called A with a value of 1. So if you really want to pass in a pair, you've got to wrap it in some brackets to say I'm passing a pair. But like I say, hopefully you'll be actually wanting to use the signatures and get all their special functionality out. So your next signature, very simple. Yeah, the empty signature. Important thing to note here, this means I do not accept arguments. If you pass any arguments to a subroutine with an empty signature, you will get errors. It will not like it. You do still get access to anything in your outer scope, so there's still functions up there. And if you're talking about a method on a class, of course Perl6 actually has methods as opposed to functions that just happen to be linked classes, then you do still have access to self or dollar as it's also called. So you can have like a function that still can do stuff within with the class information. Moving, there's lots of it. So here we go now on to actual arguments, positional arguments. So in this case, I'm defining my subroutine and I'm saying it's going to take 3 scalars, A, B and C, and then point them out, nice and simple, and you've got the name mapping directly in there. So, that's nice and easy. And this will, if you call it with two arguments, it will error. If you call it 4 arguments, it will error. This is specifically saying I'm expecting 3 arguments. Most of these I have sort of tested just to make sure I'm not talking out my head. If you're dealing with a method, you'll note, so I'll go back here. You know that here we've got everything separated by commas. If you're dealing with a method on a class, you can put an optional positional argument at the front, which is then used as a reference for self. So you can basically rename self. And you'll note that I'm using a colon to separate it rather than a comma. So if you have an argument with a colon after it, then it goes, right, this is the name you want to give the self function. You can also have the self. Now, generally that by itself isn't much use. If you really want to call it class one, you can. But there are some other tricks you can do with it, which I kind of cover in this, but they're more to do with type constraints and multi-methods. So one of the things you can do is you can say, I would like, this takes an undefined self method, which basically makes it a class method rather than an object method. So and you can do that by putting after the foo you put colon capital U, and that says this is going to take an undefined class object. So I'm actually talking about class rather than object. in this case, I'm now saying, okay, so I've got to have A, B is optional, C is also optional and will default to 5. And you see in that case, calling it 1, 2, I get 1, 2, 5 because it's got the default. If I call it without B, then I will get an undefined error, but it won't run, it won't die, it will just warn to say B is undefined and you'll get a blank space. So you can do that. Singles. So singles in Perl6, slightly different to Perl5, in that you still have at for array or positional things, so that could be an array, it could be a list, it's anything that can be treated as a positional, so you can like go through it and enumerate it. And percent for, I can't remember what they call them, but basically for hash type things, but things that you can access by key. And that's basically part of the type system kind of thing. So if you want to pass in an array as an array, then you can just say, I want to add associative, I wrote it on the thing. So let's say you want to just get every positional argument. So you can do that using the star in front of the at. Now I think some of this is similar to stuff in Python, it works like that. In this case, it will handle it pretty much the same way that Perl5 does it, in that it slurps everything and flattens it down as well. So if you pass in arrays and stuff, it bats them all down into one thing. If you don't want to flatten your lists, you can use 2 stars, and then you get, it slurps all of the arguments in, but if you pass in, like for instance, 3 lists, then your at a array will have 3 lists in it. It won't have one list all flattened together. So again, that could be kind of useful. You know, you don't have to deal with like references to arrays, just pass arrays in.
Sorry,
Yellow.
big question. Does
Yes.
it flatten recursively?
Hmm?
Is it flatten recursively? So if you've got lists of lists of lists, is it...
Yes. Easiest way to find out, run up first and give it a shot. I think it does that. The question was for the camera, does it flatten recursively? I have to remember to repeat the question. Microphone pointing. And then there's the single rule slurping. Now this is So single rule, if you get a single iterable object, then it puts it into the array. Otherwise, it handles all the things. So yeah, it's a bit. I don't really understand. There's probably a use case for it that I don't get, but there you go. And it's documented. Read the slide. You can combine named and slurpy positionals. So if you want, like, you know that you're always going to have 3 elements, but then you may have optional ones after that, then you can do something like this, where you define the ones that you know are going to be in or required, and then you make the rest of them slurpy. Okay? But yeah, slurpy has to be last. So your positional slurpy has to be the last of your positional elements. Now, of course, then we get on to named arguments. So as well as just passing in positional arguments, you can also name them. So you name an argument by putting a colon in front of it, and when you do that, then you can call it using the fat arrow, or you can call it using the separate colon name and then bracketed parameters. And in this case, named arguments are always optional unless you mark them as required. So like the exact opposite to associative, which are positional, which are always required unless you mark them as optional, because reasons. But named arguments can be really quite nice, and if you're used to using sort of the whole fat arrow syntax to like passing hashes to things, then this is basically the same thing. But they get more powerful because you can do this, where you can basically define multiple names for your arguments. So in this case, I can call this function with either bar or b as my name, and it will set the value of b to the value that I pass in. And you can nest them and stuff. Now, this may seem a little bit, why would you want to do that? But I mean, firstly, let's say you've got an existing API and people are using it, and then you decide actually the name's dumb and I don't like a longer name, you can do that. But also, if that instead of saying subfoo is saying submain, then this is a command line script, and it's a command line script that can take multiple different names for an argument. So you can have your short name, your long name, your really long name, or whatever. So that's really not utterly insane. You can combine named and positional arguments. In this case, yeah, you have to define all of your positional arguments, but when you call it, I think you can pass them in the order. It's just when you're defining it, you put positionals first and then put in the named arguments. And you can have a Slurpee positional in there as well, and yeah. And there's also the Slurpee hash, so if you want to just have a whole pile of named arguments, then you can use a Slurpee hash, and it will take all your named arguments and put them into that hash. And you can combine that with positionals, and you can combine that with the Slurpee positional. I can't remember if I put a slide up about that, I think. To the whole thing. So like all the different options for arguments, chances are you can do it. There we go. So there we go. That's the 17 slides which I did go through faster than I thought I was going to, because I always talk too fast. So here's bonus slide number 1. Like I said, I could do the whole thing. Hello.
Quickly ask on the last thing. Since
Yeah,
no,
that's fine. Yeah.
So with the Slurpee hash and the Slurpee arrays,
Yeah.
would these be considered vaguely not best practice in Perl6?
Frankly, I don't know. Daniel, what do you think?
I have not used them much, so
Yeah.
I couldn't say if they were best practice.
I think, again, in either case, I think they both have potential good uses. I mean, especially Slurpee positionals, because you may be wanting to call something that could be wanting to like look at 50 things or just 10 things, whatever. I think Slurpee hashes. Yeah, I probably can't think of a really great use case for that one, but the positional one I think has got more use cases. So. On top of all of that, you then have types. So I'll go down what I've got here. So my first function, I've got a thing called number and country, which takes in 2 arguments. So I've got a named argument called number and a named argument C code, which is a country code. But I want to put a bit of rules in. So I want to say, actually, you can't have a negative number, and you can't have a floating point number of these things. These are integer. So I'm defining the number as an unsigned integer. So if I call this and I pass in, so if I call that first one, it will just take whatever. If I call the second one, now number has got to be an unsigned integer. And the country code's got to be a string. But actually, it's not just a string, it's a string, and here's where it gets fun. It's a string where it's got to be 2 characters only, lowercase, between A to Z. Now, I'm not doing the full-on having the whole list of country code matching, but I could, because this where is effectively a function. So I could have a function that checks if it's a valid country code. And this is all being done in the signature, so we're not hitting the actual code of the function. The function just has to handle the country code. You don't, because it's all being handled, what's the word? Validation is all being handled in the signature, which makes your code easier to read. Hello?
Is there already some kind of best practice for how to indent this so it's readable? Sorry.
Everybody's critic. Yeah, there probably is. Yeah, this is. I just because if I did it all in one line, I probably should have branded it. You like it there. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, this is actually your best practice. Is rather than defining putting it in your where clause, unless you really are only going to use it once, create a subset of your string class. So I'm saying country code is a subset of string that matches this A to Z2. So then I can just say country code should be a country code. So that's nice and easy. And like I say, this means that I don't know why that's there. And this means then, like I say, the validation is now not in your code block. So you don't have to start your function with a massive chunk of validation rules or like a call to an external validation script or anything. You're doing it all in your signature. Final one there, a little note. By putting brackets on the string type there, I'm basically saying A is something that could be a string. So I could pass in an integer, and it would, in here, it would be a string because it would do the string casting for me in the signature. So if your thing can be cast to a string, then A has it as cast as a string in the function body.
So the other ones, you can't pass a real number.
No, if I passed the floating point into the number, it would error. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Because I'm specifically saying it's a UIN. But if I put brackets on the UIN, then if it can cast to an unsigned integer, then it will do. which means that like if I pass 10.0, it'll go, yeah, that's fine. Second bonus slide. Multicore. Now this is the one that, like I say, this I could do another 20 minutes. And I may do it something. But a quick rundown of multicore. Multicore basically allows you to define the same subroutine with different signatures. And then the system will basically pick the signature that's most,
Specific.
yeah, that's the word, yeah. Most specific to what you're looking at. So in this case, I've got all these multiple values, and then it will basically pick the one that is most specific to what I want to do. Again, this can be very useful if you're running a command line program. So if you're running a command line program, that, I mean, for instance, a lot of the sort of Perl6 core ones like Zeph and stuff work like this in that they have multiple main methods, each of which accepts an initial string. Like there where I'm defining 5, so that's foo5. That will only happen if I call and say 5, it will fire up that percent called the 5. The other one, 7, will only get, because you would never do this defining 7 as a subset, but I just wanted to show you it. But yeah, so if you look at Zeph, you've got all these multi-main methods, which each start with a positional attribute, which is a string. And then this is all of the different things you can say to Zeph, like install, update, all these different things of each individual multi-methods, which means that the core code of that, which generally the core code in there then just calls to an external library. But again, it means that you, rather than having to have multiple, like chunk of code at the beginning, which is like looking at the arguments and working out which function path you go down, you just stick it in the multi.
So it's kind of a hybrid overriding and overloading syntax?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, one thing I found quite useful with it is, let's say I've got a specific thing that I want to call my function with, but I'm going to allow you to call it with a lot of different versions that are sort of similar to it. Like, so I want you to pass me an array, but I'm okay with you passing me just a slurpy list of positionals. But my slurpy positional one just puts that into an array and then passes it in as an array, kind of thing. Or if you pass me a hash, I'll just get all the values from the hash and then pass it in. So then I have one function that does the real work and 50 multi-methods that just tidy up the data and then pass it in. Also, you can have your multi-methods that just throw errors. So if you've got to have a specific value coming in, then you can put, if it's not there, you can throw your multi-method. And I think I'm pretty much out of time. There we go. Hope that was a bit more in depth.